Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Light Haven podcast, the show for all things spiritual, mystical, and energetic. My name is Ruth, mystery student towards the awakening of consciousness.
My name's Bianca, light worker and astrology enthusiast.
And today is a very special episode because we have a guest speaker who has agreed to join us for an in-depth look into the philosophy of stoicism and how he's been applying that in his life over the years. So welcome, Keith. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, yeah, great. Thanks for inviting me. I'm excited to be here. I don't know how in depth we can go on stoicism, but I will definitely
Yeah.
try and do my best.
Yeah.
It takes up a lot of volumes and volumes of books, but I'll
Mm-hmm.
definitely try and do my best. So I guess just to start out, I just want to say like I'm an average person. I don't have any degrees in psychology or philosophy or anything like that. So after high school and into college, I started to read about philosophy and psychology on my own. And I always found it interesting. And I was always kind of looking for like a better way to live my life. And I figured that I would find that in philosophy or psychology. But, I was kind of misled in that. And, I found a lot of great information on those two topics. But at the end of the day, it didn't really, answer those questions that I was looking for, like how to live a better life or even what living a good life actually meant. And then one day I came across Stoicism in the Cliff Notes of a psychology book. So I figured I'd give that a shot and I picked it up. And I was amazed by some of the stuff that was written so long ago. It sounded like it could have been written yesterday just because it still pertains into modern context. And so it's one of those things that almost seemed it was timeless. And then when I really got into it, I was like, wow, this is kind of what I'm looking for, when those difficult situations arise, how I can kind of navigate through that and just make life easier on myself. And then ever since then, I've kind of been hooked and practicing stoicism.
Thank you so much for that, Keith, and hearing how your everyday person can come across ancient wisdom from so long ago and find that in our modern world, it is just as applicable and practical and something we can bring into the here and now to help us with our lives. And that's what this is going to be all about. But before we dive into more specifics around Stoicism, I also wanted to pass it over to Bianca as well, because I know, Bianca, you also made mention of Stoicism, which is what made me think, oh, Keith, my friend talked a lot about Stoicism. We should get him on the show.
Yeah.
Can you talk as well from your point of view, your experience with Stoicism?
Yeah. So I have an interest in Stoicism mainly because it was a philosophy that came about around the Hellenistic period in the ancient Greco-Roman era. It came about as an interest because I am studying ancient Hellenistic astrology. And then I started learning about some of these ancient Hellenistic astrologers had this Stoic type of way of thinking. And what you try to do when you're studying an era is you try to understand the way that they were thinking back in those days. So it's not something that I've delved into too deeply because a lot of my attention and time has gone into astrology, but I feel like there are some how do I say this? There are some things that I've taken away from Stoicism that have really resonated with me. And we'll probably get into it a little bit later, but just to, throw some things out there about how the Stoics believed in like the practice of like virtue and being virtuous and also thinking about what can I control, like what's within my control and what's not in my control. A lot of mentality, like how are you thinking and is that benefiting you in your life? There were just some really cool, cool little things
Gems
that
of
really,
wisdom.
gems of wisdom that really resonated with me. So I'm excited to get into some of those things as we get on into the session. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
And that's kind of what Stoicism is known for too, are these little, just these quotes that you could easily pull from your memory. And they're very, they stand out and they're always at the top of your mind when something happens. So a lot of people will quote some of the ancient Stoics just because the wisdom that they have and how it's applicable to so many different situations. So yeah, no, I think that was a great introduction. And, everything that you said about virtue and self-discipline and control, all that is definitely on track.
Yeah, I mainly resonate with Marcus Aurelius' meditations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Awesome.
Yeah.
So at this stage, it would be important for us to actually define Stoicism because we all have a bit of a handle on what it is, and probably especially Keith, since it's your favorite philosophy. But what does Stoicism actually mean by the official definition? And then, Keith, if you could also add to that how that shows up for you personally.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great point, something that we should really start out with. So Stoicism, lowercase s, if you look in the dictionary definition of it, it means to endure pain and hardship without display of feeling or emotion. And I think a lot of people get that confused with Stoicism as a philosophy. So that's definitely not like what the philosophy is about. It has some of that in there, but I think it's almost an unfortunate thing because what people tend to do is they'll hear that word stoic and they'll be like, this isn't really for me, right? Like, I don't want to be this robot who's, not having any emotions or anything like that. So stoics are generally happy and cheerful about life, find great inner joy, and live fulfilling and engaged lives. It's good to separate lowercase stoic versus uppercase stoicism and realize that those are kind of two different things. But to me, it's a guide on how I want to live my life. So when different situations arise, whether it be good or bad, it's something that I always fall back on to give me some emotional resilience and self-discipline. And those two concepts are really important in the Stoic philosophy. It helps me get ready for those tough times in life. There's a big acceptance of fate in Stoic teaching. Everybody, unfortunately, goes through those tough things. And what you want to do is kind of build your Stoic muscle when the times are good, to kind of get that base for when times do go bad. And then the Stoics have four virtues that they want other Stoics to live by, and this is wisdom, justice, temperance, and courage. And they also stress living in accordance with nature. And there's, like I said, a big acceptance of fate and destiny, and to take whatever happens in your life and only focus on the things that you can directly control. And that kind of enables people to live a tranquil life, right? Because you're not really paying attention on those external factors that you can't control. You kind of accept those and then just focus on the things that you can control to either change the situation or, change your outlook on the situation and maybe reframe whatever's happening. I don't know if you ever heard of the serenity prayer, but it says, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Yeah. So that's like a very boiled down version of what Stoicism is about. It's a quick quote that you could kind of you have to describe it to somebody. That's a great short way to describe it. So
Love that.
yep.
Yeah, I was hearing those four principles: wisdom, justice, temperance, and courage. It makes it easy, like the prayer you mentioned, the serenity prayer, to summarize what it is. And often you'll go to people with different philosophies or traditions and that they subscribe to or follow. And when you ask them, it's so hard for them to summarize it. And then they'll start talking around, well, there's this and that part of the framework that they're following. But those four words to easily describe and summarize what it's about can make it really easy for someone to look into and adopt the philosophy.
Yeah, absolutely. it's funny that you mentioned other philosophies and stuff like that, because Stoicism is very akin to Zen Buddhism. If you guys are familiar, it's almost a one-to-one comparison on a lot of the things that the Zen Buddhists teach versus what Stoics teach. They just say Stoicism is like a Western form of Buddhism. So that's, if you're familiar with that at all, I think Stoicism kind of tends more to my analytic nature. So that's
Yeah.
kind of why I took to it rather than, Buddhism and stuff
Yeah.
like that. So yeah, there's a lot of, and I think that you find that in a lot of different, philosophies when there's these universal truths. I think a lot of people realize that and accept it, and kind of build off those things that are universal, regardless of culture or background. So it's kind of interesting to see how multiple cultures come to the same conclusion on a lot of those topics.
Yeah, I like how you mentioned that. Um, of all, this is just an ancient view, is that of all the schools of ancient philosophy, I think Stoicism to me feels the most systematic. Not that that's a bad thing at all, but yeah, it seems to just there's a lot of practicality to the way um, the Stoic philosophy is all about. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it's just
Yeah, no,
No, that does.
yep.
yeah.
And
Um,
I think it's good and bad, right? Because the good thing is it's so accessible to everybody. But the negative to it is, like, you won't find it in very many philosophy departments in college. Like, if you go to a
mm,
college and into a philosophy department, it's very rare that you're going to find a course on Stoicism. And I think the reason behind that is because it's so accessible to everybody. It's not, it doesn't
yeah.
use different type of language. It doesn't use any type of conceptual ideas. It's very down to earth. And so, when you're teaching it, you can't anybody could be an expert at it, right? Like, you don't have to
Yeah.
have a philosophy degree to understand a lot of these things because they're so universal. Again, I think a lot of people like the mysticism of other philosophies because they're kind of so hard to understand and get right. In Stoicism, it's almost the opposite, where it's just very, very easy and very straightforward. And I think that's done on purpose, right? I think it's because it's always something that you could kind of pull from your bag of tricks when things start to go bad.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah. When you mentioned earlier about the uppercase and lowercase Stoicism, was the uppercase Stoicism, I mean, because we didn't mention anything to do with that, and I'm wondering, um, just for the listeners, did you mean that? I mean, actually, I don't know what I'm trying to say here, except
Yeah, yeah,
Are
no,
you
no.
trying to say that
okay.
what's the difference between the two, if you can
I think I
clarify
have
it?
an
Yeah.
idea, and maybe you could confirm, because I really think it's important that I really want to get this out there. Is that I think, in my opinion, the uppercase Stoicism is the word being derived from the ancient Greek word for
Yeah, so that's
poikile,
the yeah, and
meaning
like,
pointed porch.
yep, exactly. Yeah, so that's when you say that, so by saying uppercase and lowercase, so uppercase would be like the proper
Yeah,
stoicism as a
yeah.
philosophy, right? When you're
Mm.
describing something specific, and then the lowercase is just stoic in general, like when you would look in
General, like,
the
yeah, yeah.
Like an
definition of
adjective.
stoic. Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. Yep.
Yeah. And I also just want, just for the listeners who don't know much about Stoicism, we know that it's from the ancient Greco-Roman era, dating centuries back. But just to reiterate, Stoicism is derived from the Greek word stoa poikile. In English is painted port. And apparently it was in a place where people, like-minded people, came together to discuss. It was like a public place where they would talk about philosophy, and I think it just developed from there, where they had teachers. There was like a founding father who then taught his students, and then those students kind of took over, and then developed into like a real full-on like stoicism as a way of being, as a philosophy. It's a real general broad
Yeah,
brush of the
that's all
history.
correct. So
Yeah.
if you go back and look at like the Greek philosophers, generally
Mhm.
what they would do is they would each school would take a different spot in Athens, and that's where they would kind of give lectures. Like Aristotle in his school would go to the gymnasium in Athens, and they would give lectures there. And then the Stoics would go to, this. I'm not even going to try and pronounce it. You did pronounce it correctly, by the way.
Oh, good. Score
The
point,
Stoic. Yeah, the painted porch, and
Painted
that's where
porch.
they yes, that's where they would give their lectures. So that's kind of the background on how that name Stoicism came to be was that's where they lectured and they kind of spread their philosophy from there. But there was different schools all around Athens. The Epicureans, I think, would gather in the gardens in Athens and lecture there. So if you look back in that era, all these schools were kind of vying for more students and
Mm,
more people to join their schools because at the end of the day that was kind of like more money for them, and what they would
mhm,
generally teach would be logic and rhetoric,
mhm,
and they would try and convince parents to send their kids to their school and kind of um, follow
mhm.
their philosophies. And that's again, that's just like a little background of ancient philosophy in general. It's not necessarily about just Stoicism, but all the different schools kind of work that way.
Did
Yeah.
Stoicism have any historical highlights along the way? Like, what was the journey from going from the painted porch to today? What were the key markers for it?
Yeah. So it definitely
Yeah.
did. So it started out with the first Stoic teacher was Zeno, and Zeno
Mhm,
was a merchant, and he was involved in a shipwreck on a trading voyage to Athens, and he lost almost everything in that shipwreck, and he barely made it
Mm.
out alive. So when you think about again back in the ancient context, right, there's no insurance back then, so he was kind of on his own after that shipwreck, but while in Athens, he was introduced to the Cynic philosophy, and
Yes, the
Cynicism.
cynics.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Mhm,
it's basically a school that focuses on virtue achieved by living a natural life. And
mhm,
living a natural life means rejecting the conventions of society and giving away all your possessions. So he took a lot of those ideas and he kind of made it into Stoicism. The Cynics kind of advocate an ascetic lifestyle, but to Stoics, money is considered a preferred indifference, meaning something that, if we had the option to get it, we would prefer to have money, but that doesn't mean that you should sacrifice living a virtuous life to obtain money. So that's kind of where the
yeah.
Stoics and Cynics kind of split ways a little bit. Um, but yeah, that's just kind of a
I
little bit of
like
a
that.
background.
I like
Mm,
that term preferred indifference towards money because I've come from a religious upbringing where you have this verse in the Bible that says the love of money is the root of all evil, and it makes it hard for you to navigate how you make your way in the world and how you feel about money, because even though I've grown up and let go of that religious aspect of my upbringing, that influence is still embedded in you. So when you want to move into abundance, but you don't want to be greedy and you don't want to sacrifice your health or your family, then figuring out how you can go after improving your lifestyle but not become obsessed, it's something that you want to be thinking about. Where's the balance? And that term preferred indifference, it's a great way to find the middle ground. You want something, but you're not going to go overboard with it. But
Yeah,
if
and you
we,
shouldn't sacrifice, living a virtuous life to obtain those things, right?
mhm,
So, at the top of everything is being virtuous and living that virtuous life. And if it means, living a virtuous life when you don't have very much money, versus living not virtuous life and obtaining a lot of money through, bad ways, that's,
Mm,
that we would definitely prefer to live virtuously uh, over, being wealthy.
I also
absolutely.
just add to that my thoughts just on the way that Stoicism is to, in my opinion, about focusing on what's within your control. Also, power of the mind. And there's a quote that I'm thinking of. I think it was one of Marcus Aurelius, one from Marcus Aurelius, and he says something to the effect of external things are not the problem. It's our assessment of them, which you can erase right now. Like, we can readjust our thinking
Mm,
about those things. So money is not the problem. It's what we label money as being, like, that's the
that's
issue.
right.
But we could think of it in everything else in this world. We're in a material world. There's good, there's bad. There's polarity, there's duality. So with the good comes the bad, because without the bad, we wouldn't be able to appreciate the good. So we nothing is inherently good or bad. They're all just what our unconscious bias, and I'm using modern jargon to explain this, an ancient concept, is that we label things, but it's not so much that it's the external thing that's the problem. It's what we view it as that's the problem. So if we adjust our mind and thinking and focus on what we can control, which is our mind, we can't control external things, we can't control other people, but we can control what's going on in our mind, and shift way that we think about things, including money. So that's just my little 2 cents.
Yeah, no, that
No, that's
definitely
very good.
makes sense. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah.
I wanted to ask because Keith, you mentioned that have you came across stoicism a long time ago and you've been applying it in your life ever since. But surely you can think back to were before you had adopted this philosophy, and how did you normally face things before, and then how the difference was after. Maybe do you have like a fun story that you can share that really highlights that contrast between how you approach things before and then after, and bringing in the Stoic philosophy and how it helped with your view?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, before Stoicism, I think I would probably classify myself, and I think most people would probably give get this classification. You live a what I would say enlightened form of hedonism, where you're kind of seeking money, social status, affluence, all that stuff. And that's fine. But I kind of knew that there just had to be more than that, right? Like there was an not an emptiness, but just a better way to live. And it wasn't really a religious thing, right? Because I was raised Catholic and I still am. I go to church every Sunday and stuff like that. So, all that stuff was in my life was kind of always there. But it was more on like a day-to-day living type thing. And that hedonistic lifestyle, it gets old after a while. And like I said, I knew that there was a better way to do it. I just didn't know what that better way was. And that's kind of where Stoicism landed in my life. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different things that, I could even think of today, right? Like nobody's, there's no perfect Stoic. We're always trying to get better and better at it. So there's not never an end goal. But in my neck of the woods, we're kind of moving in from uh, late spring to early summer. And I was just out there in my garden today, and I was thinking about like how the rabbits, like the neighborhood rabbits, would just like devastate my garden. I start in usually April, getting like all my seeds ready for my garden, and planting the seeds inside, and slowly working to May to put the seeds outdoors, and then let everything grow. But like the rabbits would always just kill probably, I don't know, 5 to 10 plants, and like they just nibble the ends of them, and then like the plants died before they could get big. And like I would always be so mad at these stupid rabbits, and then like I would yell at them like a maniac, right? Like, swearing at them, shaking my fist. But I'm like, wait, why should I be doing that? The rabbits are just doing what rabbits do, right? Like the rabbits don't know, that, oh, I'm gonna eat this person's vegetables, and it's going to make him angry. So it takes the sting out of things like that when you realize that it's these things aren't necessarily doing it just to affect you. And not only that, you could kind of start to look at the root cause of the problem, and like, okay, so I know the rabbits are going to eat my vegetables, or at least try to eat my vegetables. So what can I do to prevent that? So I ended up just taking a step back and saying, okay, well, I gotta get some row covers and put these row covers on over my vegetables until they get bigger, and the rabbits don't find them as appealing. But it's just little things like that, and like your everyday life, that you realize that, wait a minute, like there's a better way to go about this, rather than getting angry and all that stuff. So that's just one of like many examples that I was just thinking about it today when I was kind of gardening earlier, and I was like, wow, the rabbits are a great example of when I was kind of like before stoicism, like I would get mad. But even every day, like difficult coworkers, obnoxious people in general, Marcus Aurelius says, be tolerant of others and strict with yourself. And that's how I try and live my life, right? Because you understand that people are going to be jerks sometimes, or unreliable, and that's fine. That's their business, and it's not inside my control. But when you have the discipline to be strict with yourself, you find yourself, when you're acting ridiculous in a certain situation, that's when you can catch yourself and then stop the problem from going any further, because when you catch yourself, your action is in your control, and that's kind of how you could stop that from developing into something it shouldn't really be. And you can't expect others to live up to your standards at all times. If you do that, then you're almost always going to be let down. Another great quote I love is from Marcus Aurelius. He says, when you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. They are like this because they can't tell good from evil, but I've seen the beauty of good and the ugliness of evil. And then it goes on to say, and so none of them can hurt me. No one can implicate me in ugliness. And that's like, every morning, if you wake up and tell yourself, I understand that I'm going to deal with these people who just might not know that they're doing wrong, but I could be self-disciplined, and I could tell myself, okay, I understand that these people, might be doing something out of ignorance. You could really set yourself up for a good day. When you have that understanding. The Jewish people also have this idea of the things that you hate in others are actually things that you hate in yourself. So hating others gives us an easy way. Yeah, it gives us an easy way to kind of escape our own feelings of discomfort. And if we could hate them, we don't have to look too hard in our own mirror. And that's, like when you look in your own mirror and you start to see that stuff, that's when real progress, I think, is made. And that's when you start to see those things that actually help you live that tranquil life.
I love that. Just when you said that, it made me think of the work by Katie Byron, which is a set of steps that you take to identify what needs to change in yourself. So every time you're upset with someone, because you can't control them and you can't make them do what you want them to do, instead you put it back on yourself. So in one of their examples, there's a wife that's angry because she's trying to make her husband quit smoking, and he keeps telling her that he's going to quit, and she keeps catching him having a sneaky ciggy outside around the corner, and she's getting really mad at him. And so when she does the work by Katie Byron, and it says, okay, what do you think Paul should do, and why are you mad? And she says, well, I'm mad at Paul because I'm worried at his health about his health, and I want him to listen to me. She has to turn it around and point it at herself and say, I'm mad at myself because. And every time she has an accusation for Paul, like he's disrespecting me, she can only turn it back at herself and say, I'm disrespecting me because. And that way, the whole thing is about you and how your emotions are telling you something about you that is going on rather than them, because
Mm-hmm.
you can't control others. So,
Mm-hmm.
you can be with a man who smokes or not, but you can't make him not smoke.
Yeah, that's a perfect example of, how Stoics would kind of look at that problem and, face those type of issues. Um, again, it's about what you can do and what's inside your control. And she could tell her husband all the bad things about smoking, which he probably already knows, right? And,
Mm-hmm.
just try and help him. But at the end of the day, it's his decision. And you can only control your reaction to that.
Exactly. I guess we kind of talked about this with the rabbits, but especially to do with people, because people can be the most challenging. Do you have any examples of how you dealt with challenging people after you took up stoicism?
Yeah. I mean, again, it's something that you do in your everyday life. So, if if you're stuck in traffic, right, and somebody is beeping the horn and flipping you off or whatever, you feel that first emotion, right? You're always going to feel that first emotion of anger or whatever that big burst of emotion is. And then what you do is you feel it, you say, okay, I understand this is making me angry. And then that's when you take the step back and say like, okay, if this person is, yelling at me from the car and I'm going to yell back at him and, cause some road rage and, maybe get into an accident. Or, the best case scenario is you're in your car and then you yell back at him and, you swear back at him. And what's that going to do, right? Like he's not going to, the person who's beeping at you isn't going to hear you, first of all. And second of all, they're not going to change their behavior. So why should you get your blood pressure, up and boiling about something? And rather than just accepting it and saying, okay, you know what, this happened, and I'm just going to move on with it. But even in your work life, right, you always deal with those difficult people who just are constantly either questioning you or questioning your motives, and you just kind of accept that, and then you just say, okay, well, you explain yourself, and then if they keep on like doing that, you let them do that, and then just explain and defend your position, and then don't let it go that further to let it leak into other things in your life, right? Like your family life. You never want to go home from work feeling angry, and then like your kids are getting yelled at because of your whatever happened earlier in the day, right? You have to let that stuff go, because again, it doesn't help you physically or mentally, and then it just doesn't help your other relationships either when you kind of take that stuff with you.
That's so true. One thing that we do at our work, not we don't do it all the time, but you can feel the energy in the store. So I work in a construction supply store, and if everyone's been working really hard, you can feel that across the team that everyone's just been head down working away, and you can feel the tiredness at the end of the day. So when we go out the front door as we're leaving the store, I sometimes say to the team, okay, we're going to go through this like magical portal, and everything from work is going to be left behind when we go through this door. And I kind of say it as a joke, but I know that in a way it's real, because it's like creating a psychological compartment where you're deciding to let all of the stress and things of the day go as you leave the workplace, so that you can be refreshed for whatever you want to do next. Don't bring that fatigue and any difficult conversations or whatever it was that got you down during the day. Don't bring that home with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. My dad would always say, like water off a duck's back, like when a duck's in the water and he kind of dips his head, right, you see the water kind of flow off the duck's back, and like the water just doesn't penetrate his feathers, right? So, I always think about that, when somebody's, just being absurd about something, and, you just have to kind of let them do it, and, let them get their aggression out, and you just don't let it penetrate your feathers. You just
Yeah.
kind of let it flow off you. Yeah.
Because I do think that beneath all of this in the Stoic philosophy, there's this core belief in self control, in wisdom, but mainly self control. So, what are you doing when you like allow your emotions to get the better of you? You're looking your heart.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And it's like building a muscle, the more you do it every day, the better you get at it, and the less you even notice you're doing it.
It's
So,
more
if you
natural.
Yeah, exactly. If you practice these little things over the course of time, it just becomes more and more natural. And, again, I'm not any type of, sage or anything like that, but there's times where I mess up and I'm like, all right. But the thing is, you have to review and kind of reflect on yourself, right? And it goes
Yeah.
back to that Marcus quote about, being hard on yourself, not, flogging yourself because of something that you did, but just, understanding that, okay, hey, I did this today. I could probably do that better the next time, right? And just kind of reviewing your actions and reviewing what you do throughout the course of your day. And then, just taking that step back and say, you know what? Tomorrow I'm going to be better. Tomorrow I'm not going to let that impact me. And it's easier said than done a lot of times. But again, if you kind of work up to it, it just becomes easier and easier, and you kind of incorporate that into your everyday life.
Mm-hmm. And also, just off that, moving on maybe to something similar but a little bit different is the way that the Stoics believed in having like having passion or having this like unbridled type of passion and being driven to do something. They really thought like they really advised against that. At least from what my understanding is that because I mean, there's a lot. I think they also define passions, but they believed that to to have like to act with such passion is almost kind of like a almost um it's like an incorrect judgment in I don't know how to explain it, but
Yeah,
I'm
no,
not
no,
going to do
you're
myself
doing good.
justice.
No, no, you're doing good. Yeah, but so that's not necessarily just only Stoic thing. It's actually more of a
mm,
ancient Greece type thing where
mm,
the passions were, they looked at them as like almost like a type of a curse, right? Where like
mm, mm.
if you get these passions in you, like it's something that takes over your body, and like and so it's always about controlling your passions. And even on one of the famous statues, I think geez, where is it? The statue of Delphi, I think it says,
Okay.
something about like know yourself, and everything in moderation, that type of
Mm.
quote. But so yeah, I mean that
Like, because
everything in
passion's not
moderation.
natural. It's like
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So if you
so
look
to
at
be
like,
free of passion is to have happiness kind of thing,
yeah,
which
it's a
is self,
tranquility.
yeah. And then
Yeah.
that's that self-control, self-contained type of way of being as opposed to being ruled by your passions, which can result in kind of like lustful way of being sometimes, and it wasn't really what the Stoics were about in their way of being.
Yeah. And that's
Um,
not to say, you don't feel emotions, right? That's completely different. When we talk about
mhm,
passions, we mean like just that, that heightened sense where you're not thinking correctly, and
Mhm.
so it's okay to feel those emotions. And I might even argue that it's impossible to not feel that when somebody does something to you, or
Mhm.
feel that jealousy. It's just, when we talk about the passions, it's taking it to the next level and just like going out of control and not being yourself. If you get angry, like, you see it on your face, it doesn't look natural, right? Like an angry
Mhm.
face
Mhm.
in somebody, it's just like it's not natural. So that should be a pretty good hint that that's not a good state to be, because when you're yelling and your teeth are showing, and
Mhm.
it's just it's not a like
Yeah,
natural way to be. Yeah, when you look at
believe,
a normal
yeah.
person. Yep.
And I think that as well, there was, if I, but, is that how you say his name? He was, something on passions. And the Stoics have divided passions into four different types. There's the distress and fear, and then there's lust and delight. And I've divided them into these categories. Um, and it's interesting because the two categories, distress and fear, are, are rooted in the distress and delight are rooted in this current present moment, which is one other thing that I was hoping we're going to get to after this, is how they focus on being in present, being in the moment, which I love.
Hmm.
Um, which sounds familiar, right? Philosophies talk about this. So it's a universal concept that we can all agree with. Being present and in the moment is going to be more helpful than worrying about the future. Then just to finish off what I was saying about passions is that they go and categorize fear and lust as related to the future. And so when you're already thinking about the future and you're not now in the present. So yeah, I kind of liked how they've broken it down in that. But, yeah.
Yeah, because again, even if you read any of Marcus Aurelius, he talks about just the way he writes is very poetic almost, where he's talking about baking bread, and seeing the cracks develop on the bread as he's baking it, and
Yeah.
you could tell it's somebody
Yeah.
who's like living, who's taking it all in, and observing everything that's kind of going on there. And how many people bake bread and actually recognize
Mhm.
the smells, and the way cracks form on the bread. So yeah, it's definitely about living in the moment. And when you start to think about the future, that the, all that stuff, generally what happens is you're thinking about the future, and you're making a lot of stuff up in your head, and you're making
Mm.
assumptions about what's going to happen. And
False scenarios that,
yes, exactly. Yeah, like 90% of that time,
mm,
that stuff doesn't come true. And when it
mm,
does come true, it's a lot less painful than you made it out to be in your head.
yeah,
So, it's just
yeah,
adding that unneeded and unnecessary stress on your
yeah.
life. So
But I
yeah.
also say there's a quote by Marcus Aurelius. I think it's in two of his meditations. Correct me if I'm wrong. And he says, "In your actions, don't procrastinate. In your conversations, don't confuse. In your thoughts, don't wander. In your soul, don't be passive or aggressive. In your life, don't be all about business." But just parts of that I was taking, and it's like, in your actions, don't procrastinate. So do it now. Like if you want to do it now. Um,
Mhm.
and then in your conversations are confused and your thoughts don't wander, meaning like yourself and what you're doing right now. Don't like have your mind wander off into, some imaginative future that's not the present moment. So I really like how he teaches us to be like focus on what you're doing now and be present, like how you were saying about watching the bread rise and the blah 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 and the baking and yeah,
Yeah,
so I
yeah,
just love
yeah,
that.
absolutely. And when you think about it, like you don't know what's going to happen in the future, and you don't
Mm-hmm.
know if there's going to be a future for a lot of things, right? Like anything
Mm-hmm.
could happen. So, it's it, it people I think tend to overuse that, live in the now, right? Like that's
Mhm.
the cool saying to do. But yeah, it's a lot of that.
And little did they know how far back that saying went. Like it's
yeah,
ancient.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. Um,
We've been
I mean,
teaching
there's
this for centuries, and we still haven't learned our lesson to like be
yeah,
present.
yeah, exactly.
Also,
And
Seneca. One other thing that Seneca said was one of quote from him says we suffer more in imagination than in reality.
yes, exactly. Yeah, and
There's that
just
too.
a yeah, yeah. That's great that you have all those quotes, and that's kind of what Stoicism is about, right? When you're
Yeah.
pulling out those quotes, and
So
yeah, it's great.
it's too many to like just like start
Yeah,
throwing around, but they're
yeah.
really
Like
cool to
you should
draw
see.
on.
Yeah, my book of meditations is highlighted, and like the whole thing's highlighted because everything in there is like such a
Mhm.
such a good saying, and a good thing to live by.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. So
You can keep them
yeah.
in your pocket.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah. Right.
Well,
Definitely a lot of these things that we are talking about are so universal. We don't realize where these things come from. Like in the corporate world, we're taught, focus on what you can control, kind of thing. And it's just like we don't realize that we've been taught these stoic beliefs even in the corporate world. So
yeah,
it's kind of
yeah,
cool to
absolutely.
know where they stem from or the roots of where they originated from all those
Yeah, and
centuries ago.
it's definitely easy to say all those things too, but actually, when you try and internalize it, that's when I think you start to see the most benefit from that stuff. Yeah.
and coming back to what you said before about that reflection piece, I think it's such an important part of how you would apply this, because I've observed in myself, even after meditating for a period of time and diving into all of these ancient philosophies to find wisdom for myself, then next minute you can go, oh wow, that person did this to me, and your friends around you will say, yeah, they come together and agree with you because we think that's what friends should do, and we're all against one individual who did a certain thing, which, if you really reflect on it, is you and your friends are now agreeing on this one lens or story that you're all telling about this person, that can reinforce those feelings of injustice and hurt and victimization, which is not empowering. And sitting there in judgment and blame and talking about how bad someone else is, putting it back on yourself and going, well, I can only control me. So, what is it in me that is being agitated by this set of circumstances? What can I learn about me and my growth from this, rather than pointing the finger? So, I think you can't do that without reflection, even from moment to moment. And it's important to be clear that this is not going and, oh my god, why did I say that, and running that over and over in your head. Oh, I shouldn't have said that. I should.
Yeah.
It's not that,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
that's just falling into moping and self-pity and bashing yourself up. But it's more,
Mhm.
okay, what can I learn from how that went? What was going on inside of me? Where are these feelings coming from?
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of
Yeah.
people fall into that trap of, when people are agreeing with them, oh my gosh, that what happened to you is so awful. And, you really start to fall into that. Yeah, it was awful, poor me, but
Mhm.
you look at some of these Stoics, and I think Marcus Aurelius, he lost like six of his eight children, and this is, I mean, that, like, geez, you losing one child, I couldn't even imagine.
Mm.
But there's, and you don't see him, talking about this in his journal. It's just it doesn't come up, and that's not because he wasn't hurt by it. It was just due to the fact that he didn't, sit and dwell on it, and because you could dwell on that stuff, your entire life, and then like nothing else gets accomplished. They Seneca, in one of his letters to Lucilius, which was a friend of his, Lucilius was saying, like, oh, my neighbor or something had her son die, and she was mourning the son for, like, it was going on like 6 or 7 years, and he's like, it's you just got to give yourself the time to feel that, whatever feeling that is, and then just say, okay, this is enough, right? Like, this is, like, it just has to stop somewhere, and just kind of move on from that. And that goes for a lot of things in life, right? It's easy to start to feel bad about yourself, or start to feel bad about something that you did, but there's a time to do that, and then when that time is done, you just have to move on. You can't always keep on bringing up the past and doing all that stuff.
Yeah, the thought crossed my mind as well, Ruth, as you were saying, during your story, in your thoughts, and I was like, yeah, you can't sit there and feel like regret or embarrassment or anything like that for the things that we may have done, because it's more of like, I think about it, it's when I'm sitting there regretting some of the things that I said or the things that I did, it's very natural. I'm not saying, it's wrong to feel this way, but when I am in this state of mind, it's a form of like rejection in a way, because we're all going to have these moments where we're going to mess up, or we're going to say the wrong thing, whatever, do the wrong thing. We're human. And so to be feeling like, oh, like, I wish I didn't living with resentment and regret. So it's like a form of self-rejection, because I'm like, I don't I don't accept that it's almost like I'm not accepting my mistakes or my faults. And to be unaccepting of your mistakes and your faults is almost like you think, I don't know, there's no empowerment in that. So like how you said, Ruth, about um, stoicism is almost like trying to live empowered, because you're now no longer moping around living in self-pity. You're actually choosing to be like, okay, that was done. Now I'm just gonna do better next time and move on with my life. And
Yeah, exactly. It's a very
now is now.
actionable philosophy. Yeah. So it's,
Very, very, yeah.
yeah. And it's not, like I said, it's not to say that you shouldn't feel those ways. It's just
So
there's
we
a
will
time to
feel
feel
those
them.
ways. Yeah.
And then, yep, because I mean that's impossible to control, right? Like, you're always gonna have that burst of emotion, and then you just feel it,
And you
and
shouldn't
you
suppress
acknowledge
them.
it. No, no, exactly. Yeah, you
Well,
acknowledge it.
there's this quote by this oh my gosh, I don't know how to say that name. Anyway, whatever. It says it's not what happens to you, it's how you react that
Yep.
matters. So,
Yeah, Epictetus. Was that it?
Peters, that's what.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, it's so fitting. It's how we respond, and then also it's like taking into account not wallowing, because that was the past. What I did, my mistake was yesterday, or it was this morning. Now is
Right.
now, and I'm gonna react in a positive way and continue on my life journey.
Yep. Yeah, that's a great way to look at it.
Yeah,
And I don't know
yeah,
if you maybe just to level set with, the people who are listening, there's, the three philosophies or philosophers that we're talking about most are Marcus Aurelius, and he was one of the five great emperors of Rome. And the Stoic writings that we have from him are from his journal. And when he passed away, somebody found this journal, and they published it. So, like, none of the stuff in it's called Meditations. None of the
yes,
stuff in Meditations
meditations.
was actually supposed to be written. This was all stuff for him that he was, writing down to say, okay, this is how I should be. This is, a reflection of the day. And then the second one that we talk about is Seneca. And Seneca was a playwright and a political advisor in ancient Rome. And most of writings that we have from Seneca or from letters from him to a friend of his, Lucilius. And, Lucilius would come to him and say, hey, I have this problem. And Seneca would kind of respond in like a stoic way and say, hey, maybe try doing this, this, and this.
Yeah.
And then the third one is Epictetus. And Epictetus was actually a slave in Rome. And then he became a teacher, a Stoic teacher. And then what survived from Epictetus was something we call the Enchiridion. And this was basically one of his lectures, or, his lecture, a student was taking notes on the things that he said. And then the student, all those notes from Epictetus's class were published into this book called the Enchiridion. So just to kind of level set, there's, those are the three main Stoics. There's obviously a lot of other ones, but, just in case people are kind of wondering who these people were.
Thank you so much for going through those.
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
it's so
Just a little
helpful
context.
Yeah, exactly. Adds context to who are these people that they're talking about, So really, really is helpful.
Absolutely.
I believe. Yeah.
And we've heard all these benefits of Stoicism. Maybe someone who's been listening in might be really excited to take up Stoicism, and they might wonder if they're not necessarily prepared to do a whole bunch of research or start reading through the meditations, what would be a quick way for them to take up this type of discipline and apply it straight away?
Yeah, that's that's definitely a fair question. I'd say probably the thing that helped me the most, and if like there's one thing that I could take away is just being grateful for everything that you have and realize that nothing lasts forever. There's this big concept in Stoicism where we don't actually own anything, right? Regardless of what it is, whether it be your house, whether it be, our car or our loved ones, it's all borrowed. We don't actually own any of it, and it could be all taken away in the blink of an eye, right? Like a fire, or anything could happen, a flood, and all that stuff that you have, it could all go away tomorrow. And if you kind of realize that, it really helps you to internalize the moments that you do have with your loved ones, or it really helps you appreciate things that you do own in your life. So that's one of the things that I think helped me change the most in terms of my mindset. And it is a little bit disheartening if you think about it, because anything could happen and it's a little bit scary. But then on the other hand, if you know that this stuff's not going to be around forever, you tend to cherish it a little bit more and appreciate things a little bit more than you would try and take a couple things every day that you're thankful for and try and change it up every day, but look back and say, I'm thankful for this that happened today. Like, yeah, this was really great. And then it kind of, at the end of the day, if you keep on doing that every day, you'll be amazed how much more fulfilling your life seems, and just how better of a quality of a life you'll start to have. And then it's just amazing how much different I see the world now that I have been practicing Stoicism. Things that I used to think were important just aren't really important anymore. I love watching those like house buying shows on TV where, these people are in, maybe it might be a couple buying a new house, and they go through the house, and then they're like in the master bedroom and they see that, oh, this isn't a walk-in closet. And I actually heard one people, a couple say like, oh, I don't know how they live like this. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, this bedroom is probably half the size of my house, and like it's not a walk-in closet. I was like, man, if you're, if that's the thing that you're that's not making you upset during the day, like, geez, what else is there? But again, that's fine. People definitely all live different lives, but I just think of myself and I'm like, wow, that there's a lot of other things that I have in my life that like the size of a closet, or whatever other little thing. If that made me upset, I would be upset at a lot of different things. So again, it's just that feeling of gratefulness and being appreciative of everything that you have. I think that's definitely a huge takeaway for me, and I look at the world a lot differently now because of that.
Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on that, Keith. Like, there are some things that I also resonated with in terms of stoicism, not only just teaching me to be in the moment, and more so how you were saying about just being grateful for the things that I have. It's such a mind shift because we tend to be being in such a materialistic world that we're living in. You start to feel sometimes starts to feel like keeping up with the Joneses. Like you trying to, have that house, have that car, have the perfect career, and and have all these things. Then for what, And is that really truly what's going to make you happy? And I've had to reevaluate some of these things in my life, and it's actually quite nice because I've been raised in humble beginnings. So we didn't have a lot growing up. And so when I was in my early 20s and I was just out of university, I was like, yes, I'm going to work and I'm going to do all these things that I've wanted. And then you start doing those things that you wanted. And it's like this never ending desire, never ending. It's always like you want more. Now you've got this. Now you want something next. And it was just like, actually, now that I think about it, these things don't make me happy. Like what really makes me happy is just the quality of my relationships with people that I love, and trying to refocus and shift your way of thinking into that of like, what do I have that's of value to me that's not tangible? Do I live a virtuous life? Am I an upstanding person in my community and in my society? Um, so it's just a lot of things that Stoicism, um, a lot of ways that Stoicism, the philosophy, can help you in your everyday life. It can make it feel more. It can enrich your life. I guess is what I'm trying to say. Is it can enrich your life by empowering you and making you feel like you are the one in control, and you, life is a choice. You make the choice every day. Yeah. What do you want to be sad, or do you want to be happy? Do you want to feel sorry for yourself, or do you want to continue on and make decisions that are going to be beneficial for you in your life?
Yeah, no,
So,
I think that was well put, and
mm,
when you I don't know if this goes for everybody, everybody's different, but I know for myself, like when I buy that new car, right, it's a moment of happiness, and then like 2 weeks
mm,
later, and then
mm,
like I'm like, it kind of wears off, and then like people just
mm,
go and chasing that next thing and that next
yeah,
thing and that next thing, and it's like a
yeah,
drug, right? You never reach that high that you want. And it's just it's a very it's a deep a deep hole, and then when you start to dig and dig and dig, just finding your way out is going to be that much tougher.
mm.
So like you said, keeping up with the Joneses, like you don't know what's going on, you see these Instagram
Oh
people, and
yeah,
you don't know what
totally.
else is going on in their life, and like
Mm,
their life probably isn't as glamorous as they're making it out to be, right? Like
exactly.
they're showing you one aspect of their life, and it's the best aspect. They're not showing you,
Mm,
their failed relationships, and
mm.
they're not talking with their family members because of whatever reason, and like
Could
there's
be addictions that
yep,
they might be struggling with, maybe
yeah,
self-image issues,
yeah,
eating disorders. We don't know, things that
yeah,
hold them captive, their own things that they have going on that are holding them back from, if we all struggle we all have our things, right? Like,
yeah.
so, yeah. So,
Yeah, and like you said, you coming from, humble beginnings and stuff like that, and you probably could have, take a different path in life, but you chose to do the right thing and work hard, and I think
yeah.
that says a lot about just self-esteem in general, right? If you work hard for something, that's what gives people their self-esteem. And then, if they're handed something to them, you don't necessarily appreciate it as much. So if you're handed a $100 bill, it's great, but if you earn that $100 bill, it means so much
Feels
more.
amazing.
Yeah, exactly.
You
And
you cherish it. You cherish it, and you're a lot more
yeah,
grateful for it because you had to work for that.
yeah, exactly. And it's not necessarily like the outcome that or it's not it's more the journey of how you got there that kind of makes you feel good about yourself, and it's not the outcome, right? Like if we start to um track our lives on the outcome of the events rather than what we did to prepare for it, and the time and effort that we put into certain goals, the outcome isn't necessarily what's important. I
Mhm.
think that anything could affect the outcome of any situation. The Stoics like to give an example of an archer, right? So if you're practicing every day to get better at shooting your bow and arrow, but then when you let that arrow fly, and if the wind pushes it off course and you kind of miss your target, there's nothing that you could have done to control that outcome, and you did everything that you were supposed to, but just because you missed that target, it shouldn't be a reflection on you as a person, or what you did to prepare for it, because the at the end of the day, fate kind of just had a hand to play in it, and that you did everything that you could to be a better archer, or whatever it is that you're trying to be, and just because you didn't make your goal, that doesn't necessarily always it shouldn't be a reflection on you as a person, or anything like that. And that's not what people should be focused on. It should be focusing on doing those good things to kind of get you where you want to be in life.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Keith.
Yep.
Thank you both for sharing all that. What I'm hearing is that everything comes down to 100% mindset. And the tools that can get us there are presence, awareness, reflection, and most importantly, gratitude. And we can be so grateful for the ancient philosophers and all of their thoughts that we discussed today that we can draw on in our modern living that are just as relevant and that can get us through the ups and downs. It's from our daily practice, daily reflecting, staying present and aware and grateful. These are the things that make a good life. And it's all within us, it's all within our power. So, this has been a great discussion. And thank you so much, Keith, for joining us on the show today, and everyone for showing up. To our listeners, please remember the path to your best reality is in your hands to create when you become conscious.